This is Advisor 3.0, a show designed to help you as a financial advisor elevate your professional practice, transform your clients' lives, and take your business to the next level. I am Abraham Okusoya. Welcome to the show.
Emma, welcome. Thank you for joining us today on Advisor 3.0 podcast. How are you?
I'm really good. Really good. Well, actually, I'm really good, but I'm really tired. I'll tell you about that in a minute.
End of the year, and certainly I think everyone begins to feel that. For anyone that's listening to us today, I am delighted to welcome Emma Napier of Next Wealth. She brings to us today a wealth of experience and knowledge, and no doubt over the next hour or so, we're going to have some fun and learn some insights as we go. Hopefully no questions are off bounds, Emma?
No, I don't think so.
Out of bounds, we'll see.
I'm really bad with my facial expressions.
Don't
so
take
if my
that.
eyes go like that,
It's not because you're
or I go something like, yeah, exactly.
We are also aiming, aren't we, to have the most bleeped out sessions for the rollout credits.
Totally. This needs to be the end of series.
Dot.
Outtakes.
This is Colin Rooney.
Yeah.
This is the Advisor 3.0. Dot.
Exactly.
Fab. So I guess for those that are listening that don't know Emma in the way that some of us absolutely do, I wondered if it was, let's talk about you. Let's talk about where it all began. I believe it was kind of once upon a time in the advice land, which is clearly very different to the world you live in now. So do you want us to talk us through about what the careers look like today?
Gosh, how long we got?
Yep.
Okay. I'm pretty old, so I've done a lot of things, but I did start in advisor land, and I didn't go to university. I left school at, 16, 17, something like that. I worked for an insurance company in Chelmsford, which was where I lived at the time. And I did admin. I opened the post and I input stuff into a computer, which was all a big, filing cabinet of stuff those days, and that's all I did. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just did what people told me to do, and I stayed there for a few years. And I think the first time I ever heard about something like that was called regulation, because everyone was freaking out because it was going to be A Day, which was all around pension legislation, and obviously it completely went over my head. Didn't know what on earth anyone was talking about, but I just remember it being fussy in the office because of this regulation. So that's where I started. From there, I went to another, so from an insurance company, which was Crusader Insurance, I then went to...
What a name, Crusader Insurance.
I know. And then they kind of, and where I'm getting to, and I'm going to take a while just because there's so much to tell you, but, they shut their office, they merged, they moved to same stuff that happens now, happened then. Anyway, so from there, I went to, a broker. Well, it was a broker's in my world, but it was an IFA, and they were titchy tiny. There was probably 6 directors, a handful of admin, bit of compliance, really posh reception. Again, it was local, and I absolutely loved it. And that's where I started sort of proper administration. So I was kind of processing, I was going to say ISAs then, but it wasn't ISAs at all. I don't even think PEPs were around, which were the first, it was TESAs and things like savings, bonds, and people paying people's annuities and all those sorts of things. But I was an administrator. So I loved that. And then I grew up a bit, and I got to about 22, I think I was. And I decided I needed to go to London. I just needed to go to London just to experience it. Proper country girl, going into London, bit freaky, but I did. And I joined a company called Advisory and Brokerage Services. And they were in Chancery Lane, and they were posh. They were much, much more grown up. IFA, part of Hayes Allen Accountants. So they were the advice arm was a subset of the accountancy practice. It was there. So I did administration, looked after a few IFAs, and I loved it. I loved being in London, loved the whole life. And that's where I did my FPCs. So I I can see you laughing at me, which is absolutely hilarious.
No, I'm only laughing because I did FPCs as well.
Did you?
Yeah, so it makes me laugh because everyone that I clearly am no longer, as young as I may think I am, because everyone's moved into the world of ROs.
Well, exactly. Well, yeah, I'm quite shocked that you even said that. But anyway, so I did all of that.
An exam or that they're FPCs?
Look, you even did FPCs. No,
Yeah.
I'm shocked. Anyway, I'm very impressed with that. So I did all of that, and then I got to that crossroads where I'm like, right, I've done my FPCs. I could either be an advisor, go out and see clients, do all of those sorts of things, or I can go down the management route. And I suppose a bit of a cop-out on my part, I went down the management route. So I then was sort of head of administration, head of operations. I did a bit of compliance, all those sorts of things. And I loved A&B at the time. Absolutely loved it. I ended up being there for like 15 years or something, all in all. But throughout that time, I love talking about this because it's so relevant now, but A&B was acquired by Aegon back in the day. I can't remember what it was, but I guess I'd been there about 10 years or something, and then they were acquired by Aegon. But Aegon acquired Advisory and Brokerage and 4 other IFA firms in the South. I think they were all in the South. And it formed what's now known as Origin. So I feel like I can talk about consolidation because I was part of it, and consolidation in the early days before anyone really spoke about consolidation, and how hard it was, and just the culture and the integrations. And I felt, because we all loved working at Advisory and Brokerage Service, it was the London office, it was, we charged fees. We didn't charge, kind of on an asset basis. We were fee charging, we had to do timesheets, all that sort of stuff, and account for every 6 minutes of our time, all of those sorts of things back in that day. So we thought we were going to be the poster firm for all the other acquisitions that Aegon had made. It would be like, we'll just be like Advisory and Brokerage Services. But it didn't really happen like that because everybody thought that's what they were going in to do. So it was it was really hard, actually, to try and, not that I was part of the coming together of those 5 businesses from an exec level, but I definitely felt it from a people level. And in those days, we didn't really look at clients and all those sorts of things and the how they would feel. So I could go on all day about that, but that was Advisory and Brokerage Services. After that, I did one other IFA firm, which was called Regent, another London, and I went in as COO and did sort of that sort of job in a smaller firm. That must have been around 2013. I got so fed up with advisors and staff and talking about RDR, this thing that was called RDR. It was coming along. Advisors on the one hand were saying, well, I'm not changing. I've always done it this way. Like, what can that regulation do? So it was really hard in a sort of position of an operations director to be able to satisfy with regulation, look after clients, think about the staff, and think about propositional things. It was really hard. So I left. And I just thought, do you know what? I've done it for a long time. There's changes going to happen, and I need to just do something different. And it was Michelle Cracknell, who I'd worked with at A&B. Everybody will know Michelle. She said to me, go and talk to this lady that I've just met who's just come back from Australia, and she's thinking about setting up a business that talks about investment platforms. I was like, well, I kind of know what co-funds is, but like, what is that all about? Anyway, so that ended up being Holly Mackay. And so I met Holly probably, I think it was in Harry's bar or something like that. That was our interview. I just got on with her really well. And I joined Platform back in the early days. It was just 3 of us, I think, at that stage. It was Holly and looking after the sort of platform evolution, because it was then. Back in those days, there was no Standard Life platform, there was no Zurich platform. It was Co-Funds, Fidelity and Scandia. And I looked after the IFA side, and what we grew that to be was the hundreds of advisor firms that were starting to think about, I kind of need one of these platform things. What one do I pick? So because I'd had the experience on the sort of practical side of things, it made sense for me to run with that. So yeah, we did loads of stuff, had loads and loads of fun. And then she sold Platform. Then Holly sold Platform, and that's that story. So I left just before Holly left, and I joined True Potential. Have you got time for all this?
Yep.
Anyway, so I joined True Potential, and the reason I joined True Potential is because, again, with that sort of IFA background, I was like, oh, they're interesting. They've sewn together all the pieces of tech that an advisor would need and an end client would need, and it looks really cool. That's so logical. I want to go and do something there. So anyway, long story short, I ended up going to True Potential as head of distribution, and I mainly looked after the directly authorised side of that business. So directly authorised firms that were just using TP tech. And I was talking to them about, kind of, why don't you get your clients to log on, and why don't you do this? And so just encouraging that side of things. And then after I left TP, so I was at TP for 7 years, saw huge change, massive change in that business. Obviously massively successful business, but I came to the end of the road with that business. So I came out, and also they're based in Newcastle, and I held on for dear life that I was not going to move up north. And I stayed in London, so that was a bit of a challenge. But anyway, left TP, joined Bravura, so tech company. Wasn't too sure what on earth I was going to do in that tech company. But like all of these things, you make your contacts and you keep your network. And this one was Peter Mann. Peter Mann, who I'd known for like years and years and years, probably one of my best industry friends now. He said to me, Emma, you just need to go and talk to Nick Parsons. And Nick Parsons was the CEO of Bravura at the time, because they need you. And you could you could really help them, because they're a large global tech firm, but they're very insular and they know what they do. But what you can bring is that outside in thing. So I did that for 3 years. I looked after sales and proposition for Bravura. And then I joined Next Wealth 18 months ago. And my smile has gone up to here, because I love Next Wealth. Next Wealth is, amazing. And I've gone full circle.
Yep.
So,
So you kind of gone right back to your roots in terms of back into the land of where you originally began. And consolidation then, I guess, is probably, for you now hearing exactly the same challenges.
Yeah.
From, 25 odd years ago, in terms of those 5 businesses coming together in terms of, tech or people or distribution, and end clients, and how they understand what it means for them, because ultimately that's the biggest question. So before we kind of take a bit of a deeper dive, I think probably my understanding of, the move to platform with Holly was probably, for me, if outside looking in, the career defining moment.
Totally was.
For you.
Yeah.
It kind of then really probably brought you to a place of, I've now got my confidence, I've now got my knowledge, I now understand what doesn't work, what does work, and actually, how I can bring that to the IFA side of this kind of platform world, which was embarking on IFAs. I also heard on the rumour mill that there was a particular good Christmas do. There were hula hoop elements, things that can't be mentioned on this podcast, because it will be aired before Watersheds. So,
that was a Christmas do. Yeah. In fact, there are certain people that we both know now that literally, if they, those cartoons where the eyes go like boing, 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 it was that sort of, oh my goodness.
So in some ways, some things have changed. Your Christmas do's are no longer that risque.
No, exactly. And it was an awards, so it was a Christmas do and it was an awards at the same time. And it was held at a place called Circus in the West End. And it was, and Holly, being typically Holly, said, right, this is not going to be any normal industry awards where it goes on for hours and there's like hundreds of awards. We're going to do it in 10 minutes. And she presented all of the awards on a table. And this particular venue called Circus had this massive white, it was like a boardroom table, but it was a stage. So it had stairs both sides, and she was standing on the table, as were the dancers and all of that business afterwards. So she presented in 6 minutes, I think it was, about 4 industry awards that Platform had awarded platforms, funnily enough. And it was just hilarious. So you can imagine the people we all know kind of thinking, I'm really glad I've won this award, but oh my goodness me, I've got to get up there. What's going to happen? I'm going to drop through a trap door or something, you know. So, hilarious, yeah. Oh my God, where did you find that?
A few more secrets up my sleeve yet, Emma. No podcast would be without its research. And now you know where Advisor 3.0 gets some of its ideas for its conference in May. So now you know. Okay, so let's go back to Platform in the sense of it being that career-defining moment for you. I think it's fair to say that it's kind of helped, elevate, not only the knowledge you already had and the standing in the community, but then going on now to kind of almost come three circle back to Next Wealth.
Yeah. Totally that. So when I walked into Platform, it scared the life out of me because Holly was like no one I'd ever seen before. No one I'd ever seen before. And I didn't suddenly just transition to having a bit of confidence and being able to do public speaking and presentations. I'd never done anything like that before. But for a start, she was a woman and I hadn't worked for a woman before. But she had 2 kids, one of which was under 1, and she'd wheel B into the office, kind of stick her under the desk and have 4 phone calls and write reports and all sorts of things like that. And she'd prepare presentations, but she was very real in her delivery of those presentations.
Yep.
And I can do that. So I can do the realism, and that's where I learned to be able to just... I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but if you ask me to memorize something, memorize a set of slides, for instance, to present, I can't do it. Like my mind goes completely blank. But if you say, talk about this particular subject,
Yes.
There might be some slides in the background. That's where I can talk about it. And I think that is because I've got that practical knowledge and the realism of what actually happens. And Holly taught me that. So I think going full circle, I tried to do it in some of the corporates. So in Bravura, it didn't work really because, they're very traditional. True Potential, it did work, but there wasn't a lot of sort of industry presentations or anything like that. It was quite internal focused. So coming back to Next Wealth, I can't tell you how amazing it is to be able to kind of spread your wings and just share hopefully helpful information and practical knowledge backed up with all the stats and all the data and all the independence and all that kind of stuff that I did at Platform, but now in a market that probably needs it more than it did then because it's so vast and the areas and the barriers and challenges and conversations and decision making is so much more than it was then, because at Platform it was just which platform do I pick, is it independent, what does my due diligence need to look like. Now at Next Wealth I can probably, I've absorbed all of that and I can share all of that, and it's wonderful.
It's really interesting though for me, because if you roll back to the days of Platform and before, as you were saying, when you were first crusader employment, that is never going to leave my memory now. RDR was just, it wasn't even born. AD had only just kind of been, mentioned. So therefore regulations were a lot less than what it is now, which actually, you could almost argue that kind of that freedom of speech, that ability to present in the way that we do now, which is real, as you say, it's hitting home. It's not about having, slides 1 to 5 with these pretty pictures and way too many bullet points. Actually, what we all appreciate in our day-to-day life is understanding what does it mean for me and how is it going to help me and how does it impact me. You'd almost argue that the ability to do that now was needed actually, or if not easier, back then when regulation didn't, throw red tape in front of you or rubber stamp things. So it's, in your opinion, has that made it easier or harder?
Has it made it harder? I don't think it's made it hard. So harder to adjust, you mean?
I think so, yes.
Firms. So I don't think necessarily it's made it harder. I think there's more fear.
Yeah.
So I think advice firms now are so much more fearful of towing the line than they were back then. But I think what we did really well back then is we talked quite a lot. So, there would be seminars. There wasn't podcasts and things like that, but there were people got together. There would be, we call them networking groups now, but they were just people that met in a pub that were local advisors that got, kind of help with each other and just, well, you doing that? Yeah, I'm doing that. You doing that? Yeah. That kind of business networking rather than for a reason. So I don't think it's harder, but I do think, so I think there's more fear, but I think advice firms are grappling with where they want to be, and the decisions that they're making are affecting everything. So they've got to worry about regulation. They've got to worry about where they're going to be in 5 years' time. They've got to worry about how long it takes them to do things, and is that right? Is it not right? Should I outsource that, or should I just employ somebody to do it? So I think there's just, business-wise, it's navigating regulation is just a bigger obstacle than it was back then.
And do you think the fear is reasonable? And I know you highlighted then, they're having to think about not only what they've got to do, where they're going to be, but I guess, do you think it's kind of a bit more of a sliding scale that's increasing as opposed to decreasing? More things having to consider rather than less?
I think there's more frustrations. So I was talking to an advisor yesterday, and we do a number of dinners and get-togethers, and I've just come back, which is why I'm so tired, from some advisor roadshows. That's really tough. It's great to get out. But an advisor said to me yesterday, the really good thing is everybody's doing something different, but where regulation doesn't help is, yes, there's a fear of regulation, but they don't ever give you a template to say, just do that and you'll be fine. Just do that and you'll be fine, because it's principles based. So the purpose of getting together with like-minded firms is even more important. It's so important. And we were talking, about kind of driving that energy and that positivity to just do the right thing, because consumer duty, it's not a bad thing. I mean, how could it be a bad thing looking after the end client? That's surely what any business in any industry should be doing. And I think, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I just think that it's different, but that power of talking to like-minded firms, that peer-to-peer positivity and generation of good ideas has to be good, because maybe that's what the FCA are looking for.
I think you're right. I think there's a lot of myths. If we think about potential investment propositions being one of them, everybody goes off and writes documents, and they think it has to cover this, and it has to be worded in such a fashion, and it has to be constructed in such a way, when actually what it boils down to is, what do you stand for, what's important, and how do you plan to deliver that, and how do you how are you going to be accountable for the delivery of that, which I think leads into your point nicely around templates could be also quite helpful for advisors to follow.
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned earlier on working for Holly because she was a woman, and Emma, I've known you for some years now, and equality and empowering women is incredibly important to you and a true passion of yours. Where did that come from? Was there a particular experience or moment, I guess, in your career where you felt that either that wasn't being represented correctly, or actually, why are we not thinking about this? As I say, you mentioned Holly being working for a woman. Where's that all been born from?
So back in Platform Holidays, we did an event for just women. And back in the day, it had the most horrendous names called Chicks.
Crusader.
I know,
Chicks,
don't judge.
Dancing
Honestly,
Elvis. Right,
it was called Chicks. And the first event that we ever did, it was Holly's idea, was to get women in our industry together to support each other. And so we held an event. It was at Schroders, and we had this event, and we were talking just about general industry challenges. It was so great because women came, they didn't really know what they were going to experience, but it was just the fact of being able to talk to somebody in another corporate, for instance, and go, well, what happens with you? And like, do you have this problem? And do you have that? So it was a networking thing. But what we did, it was Christmas time. So we had the event, like
I'm a bit
an hour
nervous
or
where
so.
this is going.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. Honestly, it's really fine. There's no swinging things.
No tassels.
No tassels. No, not that. Maybe that's where it came from. The idea came from. But anyway, so outside of the Schroders auditorium that they've got, we had stalls, kind of independent stalls of products, because it was Christmas time, a handbag store and a perfume store and things like that, jewellery. And the reason that Holly did it like that is because a number of the women that are working in financial services are also probably thinking about, oh God, I've got Christmas shopping to do, and why not incorporate it all together? Maybe and that was the purpose. So that was the first experience. And that was where I, again, just had that, we should join together. We should talk to each other about experiences and help each other as well. Because in that room, it wasn't just kind of old farts like me. There were younger people in there that had been sent by their large corporate to come and join this women's event. And they were at the start of their careers. So it was really important to make sure that they felt that they had somewhere to lean on or to somebody to talk to. So I developed the passion for it there. But then I went off to True Potential, and I was kind of in True Potential land for 7 years. But Heather, who owns Next Wealth, and Sam Seaton, during COVID, decided to get a gathering together, and that became Women in Platforms. And the reason is to keep that momentum of helping each other through COVID, being at home. And it kind of grew Women in Platforms from there, from just logging on at 6:00 on a Wednesday night with a glass of wine, thinking, I've put the kids to bed, and, I've done the day's work. I'm probably going to go and load the dishwasher, and, all of those sorts of things. But just, and by the way, I've got a proposal or a presentation to write tomorrow. So just talking about that was really helpful. It grew and grew and grew and grew. So
talk us through Women in Platforms then, as we're on that point, what is it, what have you seen over the years that you've been involved with it? What is the direction of travel for Women in Platforms?
So Heather, Sam, Rose and Gillian started the online events. They did a few meetups, sort of face-to-face as well, but it tended to be just London. And then after so I always joined when I could. And I think I presented, or not presented, but Sam Seaton, I think, spoke to me about this sort of stuff before. I had a few messages from people saying that was really inspiring. I've got this going on, or, what would you do in there? And it just helped that network. And I just think that we're really good at asking for help sometimes. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. I don't know, but we're really good. So I had a few messages from people, and I was just like, I can do that. I want to support anyone in this industry, whoever they are, if they're facing challenges or a decision to be made. I mean, I was that person. Did I go down the advisor route? Did I go down the management route? Yep. Did I come out of being an IFA and go to platform? Had I have had somebody that was saying to me, I think it could be good for this, and if I were you, just make sure you do those 3 things, that would have been really helpful. So that's why I'm so bothered about it. So after a couple of years, Heather, Gillian, Rose and Sam passed over the baton to myself, Helena Wardle and Amira Norris, to just continue whatever Women in Platforms was going to be. So our tenure, which lasted, I think, 3 years, I said to Amira, I think she's like gained a year or something. I'm sure it's 2 years. But anyway, over our 3 years, what we tried to do is grow it. So, widen the amount of women that would come. And it's not, I don't know why we called it Women in Platforms, because most of the contributors and people that turn up are advisors, people that work in large institutions, platforms, life companies, tax advice. I mean, we've got, a bit of everything. And I think the membership, it's a spreadsheet, but the names go to about 250 people, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
That would log on a 6:00 on a Wednesday night to listen to a story or something inspiring that could help maybe tomorrow when you open your laptop or go into the office, you just do something a little bit different. And there's loads of examples of presentations that I heard, but there was one presentation by Appy. Do you know Appy? Yeah.
I know her. I don't know her.
So Appy presented, and she told this amazing story about, you know, how she'd had to act within a big corporate that she was part of.
I think I was on that.
Were you?
Yes,
Right.
I remember
Okay.
it now. 'Cause
And
the language and some of
yeah,
the yes.
yeah. So she was saying things like, had to dress for like a man.
Yes.
For 5 years or 3 years or whatever it was, to be accepted on the floor and things like that. And it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the other thing she said that I really remember is she said, I open my inbox in the morning and then I turn it off, and I open it at night, and anything that's urgent I deal with, and I compartmentalize everything, and then I deal with it. And I was just like, that's such a good way of managing your inbox, because I'm terrible. If something comes in, I'm like, oh, what's that all about? And I go and do that. And I thought, what was I doing? And it was just really helpful. And loads of people, well, you were on there, so you had said that was so helpful because I've changed a habit, or I've changed the way that I'm doing things, or it's given me inspiration to go and have a conversation. And it's like, that's why I do it.
I remember that, in fact, because I remember the feedback at the time being around you actually focus more on the things that you had to get done in that day, as opposed to, as you say, naturally the phone goes, someone talks, an email pops in. As you know, the world's changed massively today as well, in the sense you can be on a Zoom call and something catches your eye, you know, and in old world you wouldn't have done that because you would have been in the room and present, and that's not a criticism of anyone, it's just the fact of life now and the way the world's changed. So I remember the feedback around that. So, and the direction of travel, to conclude that part for women in platforms, so what's happening now?
Well, apparently we've been doing it for 3 years.
That's good, well done.
Apparently. And it's time now for us to hand over. There you go. So yeah, Kate and the lovely Justine are going to be taking over. I don't know why I'm presenting here. We swap roles for a second. Like to announce that Kate Phillips, Justine Petullo, are going to be the new chairs of Women in Platforms. And at the same time, you've been, Kate Phillips,
Yes.
involved in Women in Asset Servicing.
Yes.
Which is another massively successful women's networking group. And the plan is to merge those together.
It is, yeah.
So Kate, would you like to?
So in the notes, what are we talking about? No, fab. Exciting times ahead. And personally for me, I think that, as you say, that equally all of them, there are a number of networks that we could reference across the industry. And whilst they carry the women in titles, they're not, you know, exclusively for women. There's some fabulous counterparts from all walks of life that join in, and personally they've been a huge part of my DFM learning journey. You know, when we met nearly 5 years ago, I knew nobody and nothing. I still know nothing, but I know a few more people. So, you know, it massively helped me understand. I remember your friendly face when I walked into Schroders, where, you know, I was a rabbit in a headlight and you walked over, and here we are 5 years later.
It's daunting, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there's so much to learn. You know, there's forever moving parts. So, you know, I can advocate that. But before we make this about a networking podcast and I get shot, let's just talk. I want to just spend 30 seconds, if I may, talking about Bravura, if I may, because that was a moment. We talked about kind of platform being your career defining moment. And I just want to spend a few seconds, if I may, around Bravura, because for me personally, knowing you at that point, that was probably the biggest and hardest time of your career, you know, from the U-turn, that I guess the role and the shape and the delivery of what the business was trying to do to what happened was massive, not only for you, but Bravura and the industry. And are you comfortable to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course.
So for those that don't know, do you want to walk through what happened with Bravura?
So I joined Bravura, didn't really know much about them. I knew that they were the engine behind people like Fidelity and M&G's platform, things like that. I didn't really know what happens behind the scenes. And I went in, and it was hard. It was a hard transition for me, a really hard transition, because they didn't speak the same language as I did.
Yep.
So for a start, most of a tech firm, most of the people wear headphones all day and don't speak, which is not a criticism. They've got, they need to focus. So there wasn't that sort of general office, let's all get to it. So I'd come from True Potential, where everything is very right. Let's get in a room, let's drive some innovation, let's change things, let's upset the norm and do something different. Bravura wasn't like that. Bravura was like, we've had this platform software for however many years, it works. We also do transfer agency as well, which I don't really understand. It was far too complicated for me. I know what it is, and that was really, I didn't have anything to do with that. But it was kind of, my role was sales and proposition.
Yeah.
And so on the sales side, the important part is, how can you talk to the industry to gain or use your software?
Yeah.
So my input to that was kind of, you need to jazz it up a bit, because it's been doing what it's been doing for the last goodness knows how long. Everyone's really happy with it. It's a great big lump of a machine, and everyone's pretty happy. But the world's changing over here. So, and Bravura had made a couple of acquisitions. They bought a company called Finicomp, and they bought a back office provider in Australia called Midwinter. Finicomp, I didn't really understand that at the start, because it was these things called microservices. And I remember at the time, because I wasn't a techie, I would say, well, why can't you take that CGT microservice and just stick it in there then? Why can't someone just go and do that?
Yep.
And it doesn't work like that. It sort of does in principle, but it doesn't work like that. Oh, and by the way, it probably take 2 years to deliver something like that. I mean, that to me was balmy. The other thing is they bought back office provider Funky, and I'd been used to obviously the True Potential system that was really, really quick and easy and logical and simple. So with my proposition head, I was like, right, okay, so you've got this big platform that everyone knows and loves. You've got all these microservices. Why don't we just create something a little bit new and a little bit different? And why don't we sew together that Midwinter back office into the Sonata platform and have an end-to-end kind of straight through, and that would be great for Fidelity and M&G, and because they've all got advisors that would really. So I think after I'd written about 6 business cases, because that's what happens in large firms, it didn't really go anywhere. And I think it wasn't because that wasn't a good idea. It wasn't just my idea. I worked with some great people. We had a brilliant team, a sort of smaller team looking after sales and proposition. The company was almost too big to think, to make a decision, but also they were global. So they've got all sorts of things going on in Australia and New Zealand and India and all of those places. And you've got the UK that was saying, like, let's do this. By the way, it's going to cost so many £1 million worth to do it. So whilst it was a good idea, it just never got off the ground. So for someone like me, I'm like, you're just going to miss the boat here. And I suppose that's sort of what happened. But not because it was a decision, a decision made to not do it. It was just, we've got that, and we just can't make it. So yeah, it was hard. And also I'm not good in corporate, I've worked out. I'd done the practical side of IFAs. I knew that we needed tech to be able to progress and make things easier and more logical and do that profitably and efficiently. So I couldn't understand that even if large tech provider could do all of those things, Fidelity or M&G or whoever was using that were never going to wait 2 years, because it'd probably be out of date by then. So it just didn't. So yeah, that was really frustrating.
I can imagine, especially where your head had been for years about, kind of uncomplexing the complexity already in the process. So, okay, so let's move on. Next wealth.
That wasn't 30 seconds though, was it?
Next wealth.
Next wealth.
So let's think about, for those that don't understand, we touched on it earlier, Next Wealth is a research firm that predominantly looks at kind of every part of the puzzle, from advice to platforms to research to risk to how we think about the world, absolutely everything. And that was probably a very poor summary, because I don't work for Next Wealth. What is it that Next Wealth is seeing, I guess, in today's world, in the advice market? What insights can you share with us?
Annually, so we refresh these reports annually, and I don't particularly work on the research side of things because I've always got the answer before I've asked the questions. I think that comes from where I've come from. But so Next Wealth, we produce 4 reports a year on advisor tech. So that's really important. It's important from an industry point of view because what tech are advisors using, what works, what doesn't work, and where do they need to get to in the kind of under that big umbrella of sort of consumer duty and general business progression. So 4 reports, we do one on hybrid advice, tech, we do risk. There was one last year on back office. So there's been a big transition of advisors or advice firms, should I say, thinking about how they're utilizing tech, whether it's back office traditional like I used to use, that's a big filing cabinet and really good to manage your income, because that's pretty much what we were bothered about as advisors. I've got 2 pence coming in from Prudential or Pearl Assurance from 100 years ago. I'm not going to upset that. To other firms thinking about the systems of record, systems of engagement. So how can I have a system that then interacts with my client really well? How can I have my client feed things in through that system that's then going to talk to my record system? And so anyway, all of that. So we do advisor tech, stack, 4 reports a year, 2 reports a year on MPS as well, because that's another big driver this market's seen over the, you'd know that, over the last...
Hashtag shame plug.
Is that what you asked my question? No. 2 reports a year on that, because that is a significant change in the direction of how advisors are investing assets and where they're getting to and what's important to them. So again, with a kind of link back to consumer duty and regulation, we talk to advisors all the time because they facilitate what goes into our research for it to be independent, because it's not our view. It has to be what goes on the ground. And there's just been a massive shift in that. So we've got a report coming out next week.
Fab. And what's that going to focus on?
MPS. So there's 2 reports a year. The next one comes out next week. We also do a report on consolidators and aggregators as well. So that's really important. So I think Next Wealth stands for what's next in wealth. I mean, that's a pretty cliche, I guess. But
and is there any insights you can share in terms of what's coming next for wealth?
That's a big question. What I will say is something new that's happened this year, and this is why I love Next Wealth so much, because unlike Bravura, Heather and I have a conversation, or the team have a conversation, and we're like, advisors really need to know about this, or advisors are really struggling with this. The industry needs to know about that. And our purpose is to bring people together to be able to take that next step forward in wealth. So AI is probably the most talked about piece of tech that advisors are thinking about right now.
And is that both from being a part of the advising process, and I'm talking about listening in and regurgitating fact-find conversations, to understanding kind of the initial meeting, as well as actually doing some of the suitability, the reports it pushes out at the back end, kind of all the way through the process? Is that where you're seeing, or is it splitting into 2 camps?
It's like a natural evolution. I think if you asked me that question last year, I'd say the first point. So advisors are starting to think about AI to regurgitate fact finds, taking meeting notes and things like that. I don't think we're there anymore. I think people are. We've definitely moved on. So Next Wealth created a membership, a networking group for firms that are thinking about it or have either adopted some sort of AI tech, plus providers whoever you are, insurance companies and platforms and, any part of the advice chain that wants to understand what advisors need and where they're going with it. So it's bringing people together again. So the AI lab was created 4 meetings a year to do just that. But what we're seeing this year, more than last year, is I think if Heather was here, she would quote the stat. But I think it's gone from something like 6% last year of advisors that are thinking about adopting some sort of AI tech to help with the process to something like 28%.
Wow.
Heather can reel off the stats. This is where I can't remember stuff.
Well, this is interesting though, because actually AI is still a really big unknown,
Yeah.
for certain part. That's why I was asking the question in terms of if it's being broken down into segments, because actually you're dead right. People are already using that upfront AI tech in meetings and fact finds and capturing conversations with clients. That seems to be working. It comes back to the age-old, how do you integrate that with the technology that, they're using?
Exactly.
So we're back to that same problem again.
You can't go 3 steps forward and then go pinging back.
Absolutely. And then you've got this side of the equation, which is more about your suitability and your output side, which actually I think is probably the biggest open arena in terms of how does that work? And actually this creates an even bigger, how does that plug into the tech world that I'm already using? So it kind of feels, we're still got 2 camp pedals.
And the power of being able to have that conversation is to talk to someone that's done it. And that's why it's so, and that's where Next Wealth sit. So we sit right in the middle to be able to do that.
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. I kind of always laugh because I think that Next Wealth could be like the whistleblowers of the industry, because it's almost like if there's something that advisors need to know, it's kind of like the best way to do that is through an informed channel.
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is we have 800 advice professionals. So not just advisors, paraplanners, administrators, compliance people, feeding into what happens every day in their life. And they feed that through to us. We talk to them all the time. It's a big part of my role. As I say, I've just come back from 2 weeks on the road talking to advisors that are sitting there thinking, right, I've just done my attestation for consumer duty. I'm thinking about some AI tech over here. I've got someone that wants to buy my business over here. It's really interesting that I can quote some stats to them, and this is what the rest of the industry is doing. This is what the platform market looks like. This is what the MPS market looks like. But what they really want to know is that's really interesting, but I'm in the next 12 months, I want to get to there.
Yep.
And that's the power of what Next Wealth brings, because it brings the industry and the people.
And it takes the emotion out of the room as well, I guess. Because actually, you're just sharing good old-fashioned information and knowledge between different people and different business types as well, because that's important. So one thing we haven't touched on, and I know a couple of kind of final questions for me, we haven't touched on the Verve Group. You sit on the board of the Verve Group. Talk us through what does that mean? How did you get involved?
How did I get involved? I think I've always been involved in some way with Verve Group. I remember, so being like you said, when I met you, I met Kathy Harrison when I was at Platform. It was just Kathy. She'd come out of, I can't remember the company that she worked for, but she said, I think I'm going to set up on my own. Didn't know her before. Somebody asked me, I can't remember who it was, to catch up with her. I met her at Liverpool Street Station in the Cafe Nero that used to be right outside the door. And she said, I think I'm going to go on my own. I'm going to be an outsourced paraplanner. There seems to be a lot of people that want to outsource their paraplanning. I was like, go for it. Like that whole women in talking to other. I think making time. So I made time for her is really important, going back to that, what women do for each other. And that's when I met Kathy. So she was thinking about parasols at the time and the outsourced paraplanning. And then I just constantly met her when she's been in London, how you getting on? And she was just like, it's growing. And she was one of those people that inspired me because she was a fixer too. So she would say something like, well, there's no one doing that. Like there's no one doing this sort of training thing, or there's no one. So she'd just go, I'm just going to set up another business. And she laughed about it. And she was just, her philosophy was, what can go wrong? Because you just shut it down again. As long as you're doing something good and the industry wants it and needs it, then that's it. So that's how that business became what's now the Verve. So indirectly, I've always had something to do with it, just because Kathy and I chat a lot, and we share ideas, and I give them, what I think, whether that's important, relevant or not, I don't know. So she's just got to a significant size where she's invested in a board structure. So it made sense that that I would be a non-exec on the Verve. I've kind of been there from the start in the background, and she's got some great intentions. It's a great business, again, helping people in this industry. It feels like a nice, just a nice environment to be in.
I guess as well, it affords you the opportunity now to kind of give back as you, again, a passion of yours, an area to give back and actually, help where you can or offer guidance.
Yeah. And also the other really cool thing is the chair of the board of Verve is Ruth Sturkey. And I worked with Ruth at A&B.
Full circle again.
Yeah, mad, isn't it?
So Emma, you've got a daughter. And tell me, is she coming into the world of finance, or has she seen the light and definitely going elsewhere?
No, I think she's going to run an animal sanctuary or something like that.
Yep.
She's 11. And yeah, I think that's, she sets her sights quite high, I have to say. So I think her animal sanctuary is going to be a big house somewhere, because she doesn't see anything. I don't know why she thinks that. But yeah, she's not really academic at all, but I'm not bothered about that either.
No.
But I love seeing her flourish through the years as well, because she had a bit of a tough time, like all kids do. But she's happy, and as long as she remains happy, that's why we get up in the morning. And actually, Heather and I talk about this sort of stuff all the time. She's got children as well, bit older than Lexia, but just that whole that's what we do. Like that's the most important thing. And if they're happy, we're happy, and if we're happy, they're happy.
Indeed.
And that's really important.
Emma, finally, what advice would you give? It sounds like the typical question to ask, but actually, what advice would you give now to somebody that's joining this industry, or maybe has been in the industry a little while but feeling stuck? What is it that you think, do you know what, if there's one thing, back a bit like back in the day of Appy saying, open your inbox, close your inbox, deal with it later. What advice would you give?
So I would just say, be brave. Be brave and do it. Positive mindset. I love that as well. So be brave, be positive, because I love actually the Stephen Bartlett 51% thing.
Yeah.
And because sometimes you just can't make a decision. You don't know, and there might be a big consequence if you make the wrong one. But what can be wrong if you are 51% one way or the other? So in somebody joining this industry as a career, I'd say be brave. And I would say don't be afraid to challenge the norm, because we have to move on, and, kind of don't just accept that it takes 2 years to do something, or don't just ask the why, maybe the 5 whys, something like that. But yeah,
Brilliant.
That would be my advice.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you for joining us today. You've been a wonderful guest, and see you soon.
See you soon.
That's a wrap on today's show. Massive thanks to my production crew, especially Jake Osha, Melissa Canham, and the entire team. And of course, to our sponsor, Timeline, the market-leading provider of integrated planning technology and model portfolio service to advisors. I do hope you've enjoyed today's show. Head over to Apple Podcast and give us your review there. Until next time, goodbye.